Great literature asks and explores the big questions. In the case of One Piece, among other questions, Oda asks the following: are we brave enough to stop the cycle of vengeance? Are we strong enough to forgive those who have harmed our own? Are we wise enough to put a stop to the legacy of hate? Are we compassionate enough to see ourselves in others, even our foes? And what do we want our legacy to be? Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Let's talk One Piece, specifically the Fishman Island saga, including the return to Shabandi and the Fishman Island arcs. I won't say a ton about Return to Shabandi. It is, after all, a pretty short little arc, but it was delightful to see the Straw Hats get back together again. I had to whoop and cheer when I saw them with their newly acquired abilities and powers. It was really cool to see, especially Luffy with his haki and all of that. Great stuff. I had a great time just seeing them reunited. 2 years of hard work. It was really gratifying. And also, of course, I will not spoil this, but I did watch the One Piece fan letter and thoroughly enjoyed it. I am not an anime watcher, but I was advised by so many people to check that out, and I thought it was just splendid. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it does present the events of the Marineford arc as well as the Return to Shabandi from a different perspective, which is really valuable. It is the perspective of us, of the fans, the viewers, the readers of One Piece, but also the ordinary everyday people. And as such, it was a really great way to provide insight into who the Straw Hats are, what they represent, and what they can represent for us, or us ordinary people, who, after all, we have dreams as well. We have a legacy to leave in this world. And speaking of which, the idea of legacy is just so key to this beautiful series. When we get to Fishman Island, we do see Rayleigh's memories of Roger with this straw hat. Now we know where that straw hat came from. And it didn't even begin necessarily with Shanks. So that was kind of cool. But there is, of course, deep symbolism with that straw hat. It is a symbol of legacy, of following one's dreams, of the inheritance of will. Now, this is a big word in One Piece, will, the desire for life, desire to pursue one's dreams. These are things that are handed down, and we see that Luffy is worthy of this straw hat, of those dreams. And this is also a very interesting statement about destiny versus pursuing one's dream. In other words, free will. There it is again, the word will. The idea that you can defy your destiny by being courageous. This is a wonderful concept that, and I'm always quoting Old English to you guys, but it is something you do see in poetry as old as Old English, the idea that you can defy fate if you're courageous enough and make your own fate. And another example of legacy, we see the tragic story of Kuma and his sacrifice. There is beauty in that sacrifice, of course, but the tragedy is how he ends up. And of course, this is his legacy, the preservation of the Straw Hats, the passing on of the torch. Ultimately, probably it is a mission of sorts that he inherits from Dragon, Luffy's father. So it is interesting to see that he actually asked Dr. Vegapunk, who I was assuming was kind of a villain, but apparently if he's willing to help Kuma in this way, he's probably just another subject of the world government doing what he's told for the most part. But he did allow Kuma that one last mission. He did program him with that last mission that he requested in order to help the Straw Hats, which I thought was beautiful. The Navy is definitely using him, but he was able to subvert the Navy just that little bit by, of course, previously flicking the Straw Hats away to their various places where they would learn how to be stronger. And it seems entirely by design. Each of the places where Kuma sent them turned out to be ideal for each of the Straw Hats in order to learn to be stronger and better. So that was an intentional, I'm sure. But he also guarded their ship until the first of them would return, and that was the final mission that he had Dr. Vegapunk program him with. So this is sacrifice. This is the passing on of a dream. This is legacy. An idea is bigger than an individual, and pursuing such ideas gives purpose to life. So this is a beautiful theme that we see as well in the main story of Fishman Island, where you have figures like Queen Otohime and Fisher Tiger, who both understand that the passing on of a dream in order to make the world better is a tremendously important legacy. Though they do differ, and we'll talk about that a little bit, they do differ in how they proceed to enact their dream in the world and in what they're able to do as well. But we see the opposite of them in the villains of this saga, in Vanderdecken and Hody, where they are different, of course, as well. Vanderdecken, to me, is basically a narcissist. He's all about me. If I can't have Princess Shirahoshi, no one will, right? It's just a very narcissistic thing to say. So I think he's basically a narcissist, whereas Hody is consumed by hate. He is like Arlong from before, but he is Arlong on steroids, literally. He is willing to sacrifice everything to his hatred. Not just his enemy, not just his perceived foe, not just the other, but even his own kind. If they disagree with him, if they get in his way, they are to be obliterated. It's you're either with me or you're against me, that kind of thing. And so he is willing to sacrifice all to his hatred. And the hatred is itself symbolized in the steroids, which make a monster out of Hody, essentially, and burn him out, because that is what happens to him and his henchmen at the end. When they are shriveled up old people, they essentially have been burned out by their hatred. So the steroids, I think, are really powerful metaphor for hatred and how it drives Hody and the others, but ultimately burns them out and ends up being a dead end. But his worldview is to dehumanize the other, to not see himself in the other. And this is symbolized in his order that everyone should step on the photo of Otohime. In other words, that is an act not of just defiance, not of just disagreeing with what Otohime stands for, but by taking away her very humanity. You are beneath me. You are under my feet. I step on you. I deny your existence. I deny your will. I deny your humanity. Now, as for Otohime herself, and oh, please do forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any of the names that are new to me. I do not watch the anime. I'm a reader only, and I don't look up things because I don't want to get spoiled by looking something up on the internet. So please do gently correct me in the comments if I'm mispronouncing any names, and I do appreciate that. But as for Queen Otohime herself, this is a beautifully realized character in this. But essentially, her mission is to tear down barriers. She wants to heal the rift between the fishmen and the humans. She wants to bring about peace. And in this, I find so many similarities between her and historical figures like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., who want to go about healing the rifts between various people through peace, through understanding, through seeing oneself in the other and understanding that we are all human. She wants the people of Fishman Island to become part of the rest of the world. She sees that their segregation, and whether segregation is self-imposed or imposed by someone else, it is a dead end. It will only continue to foster misunderstanding and ignorance and fear and hatred. She understands, Otohime understands that we all share the same sun. And this is another beautiful metaphor in here among several that are just so powerfully realized that Oda does such a great job with, that she understands that her people need to be under the same sun, that this is how they will thrive. And she understands the longing of her people to live in the sun like everyone else, to be as others. And this is very much seen in the fact that they cherish the roots of the sun tree that connect them to the rest of the world. Now, this is beautiful, and it also shows how she understands how to overcome distance because she moves among her people. Though she is royalty, she chooses to move among her people, to ask for people to sign her petition, to be out there among them, to understand them, to be among them, to be one of them. She does not separate herself from them. She is a figure of deep compassion. And she understands the need to break the legacy of hate by not hating even the person who kills her. That is really something. And also making her daughter swear not to bring retribution, not to hate the person who kills her. Now, Otohime is not a perfect individual. She's not a saint. Sometimes she's over emotional. Sometimes she clearly feels despair. But she never gives up, and that's the beautiful thing. She never gives up on her fight, despite the lack of her success with her petition. Is she too idealistic for this world? I don't know. I just cited a couple historical figures who enacted a similar philosophy quite successfully, transformed people around them, transformed the world through their determination, through their bravery, through their commitment to love and peace. So I guess I would answer that no, she's not too idealistic, that this is something that can happen. Is her way an effective way to combat hate? I think so, because she passes on her dream. She even manages to influence a celestial dragon. Okay, so this is the most, we've seen the celestial dragons who think of themselves as not even human because they're superior to humans. They think of themselves as above everyone, that nothing else even matters, that other lives are simply theirs to exploit as they wish and do what they want with. So even someone with that amount of prejudice and ignorance and hatred is someone that Otohime can influence through her commitment to love and compassion. And she is able to convince a celestial dragon whose life she saves to get on board with this idea of healing the rift between Fishman and humanity, overcoming his prejudice to some degree, which is, I think, is a beautiful thing. So this is, I think, raising the question, is it possible for even the most despicable of us to be redeemed? Are such people capable of redemption? People like that celestial dragon. Is compassion, in fact, toward people like that, toward people like the celestial dragon, is compassion the answer rather than punishment and retribution? These are very important questions that Oda raises in the course of this story, and I think he does so very effectively and is asking us to explore the answers to those questions. Now, speaking of legacy and being passed along, Queen Otohime gives her legacy to her daughter, Princess Shirahoshi, her legacy of peace and understanding, which is ironic in a way because Shirahoshi is in fact the incarnation of the Poseidon, as we learn here. This is the ancient world-shattering weapon that we've been hearing about and is referred to in the poneglyphs that Robin is deciphering. And of course, what we learn is that Shirahoshi is the weapon that has control over the Neptunians, which is interesting because she is Poseidon, and Neptune is the Latin name for Poseidon, which is the Greek name for that god of the seas. So that's really interesting to me. And that's not the only way in which I think Shirahoshi is paradoxical. She is pampered and isolated and very naive and afraid. And Luffy's shtick of calling her wimpy, it had me laughing a lot with Luffy's frankness and all of that. But you put that all on one side, but then on the other side, you have her compassion. And there is great strength in this character. And there is great strength in compassion. So that is an interesting paradox to me as well. Who among us could forgive our mother's killer? Who among us has the strength to do that? Now, that is something that some individuals have been able to do, to forgive the murderer of their loved one. I cannot claim that I personally necessarily would have the strength to do so, but it is something that I deeply admire, and it's something that deserves to be acknowledged and explored, and that you have a character here who can forgive the murderer of her own mother in order to kill the cycle of hate. I think is just tremendous. And so you have strength in this character, even though she is wimpy, as Luffy calls her. But you have tremendous strength and compassion. Now, it is Luffy, of course, who is the one to get her out. She does need a Luffy in her life to bring her to the forest of the sea. That is where, visiting her mother's grave, where that legacy, you can see the symbolism of that again, where that legacy is passed on. When she is, in the most funny way, gets there, of course, hidden inside Megalo, Luffy's zany idea of getting her outside. So we're having great fun here. Somehow Oda brilliantly combines goofiness and fun with these really serious themes once again, and this is the thing I admire so much about One Piece. But Luffy's bluntness and his love of adventure, this is what she needs to thrive. This is what she needs to be free, to pursue that legacy that she was born into. The isolation as a response to fear is debilitating. When we isolate ourselves in response to fear, we handicap ourselves. We must be part of the world in order to be who we're meant to be and to make positive changes. We must live out our dreams and influence others in the process. And now Shirahoshi also makes the ultimate sacrifice by putting her people ahead of her own life in attempting to save them from Noah. Now, this Noah thing is also really interesting. All the symbolism that you get in One Piece, brilliantly done, in my opinion. Noah being, of course, a biblical symbol as well, a symbol of compassion and mercy and salvation, a symbol of the salvation of humanity, the mercy upon humanity. Also, Joy Boy, okay, there's something to look out for. And the idea that Luffy, like Roger, can hear the Neptunians, that the Neptunians which drag Noah away after Shirahoshi saves the day by calling them, using her power. Shirahoshi saves the day here, not Luffy, and I think that is a strong and important message. It's not the fists that save the day, it's the compassion that saves the day here in this particular arc. And another character here I think that is really important to talk about is Fisher Tiger. Also a figure in whom legacy runs strong. And this is a little more complicated, I think. And you can understand why Fisher Tiger hates humanity, having been enslaved and having suffered the prejudice and the hatred and the racism that has been dished out by humans toward him. So he has suffered, and yet he has found the compassion to free not just the Fishman slaves, but all the slaves, people of all sorts. He does stand for segregation because he is not able to quite overcome his hatred, but he understands and he is compassionate. And we see this when he saves a human girl and risks his life. He saves her from slavery and he risks his life to bring her home to her people. And it does result in his death, that act of compassion. And in his arc, we also see the beginning of the symbolism of the blood. Now, blood is very much like the sun in this particular saga, a symbol for our common humanity. We all have the same blood. Even Sanji's stupid nosebleeds become part of this theme, actually, as they help us to see the division where Sanji needs blood because he's been seeing too many mermaids and he can't get blood because of this prejudice that has taken over the minds of the people of Fishman Island because of what has been dished out to them from the humans in the first place. And you see the cycle of hatred there. You see this the legacy of violence. Even though Fisher Tiger is unable to accept human blood, of overcoming that last barrier of hatred, we see the fulfillment of his compassion in Jinbe. And this is where I think I have found another of my favorite panels in One Piece. Just got so emotional at this moment where you have Jinbe giving his blood in defiance of the rules, in defiance of the laws, in defiance of the prejudice. He gives his blood to save his friend Luffy. And this is the moment when Oda beautifully combines these two symbols of the sun and the blood, the road to the sun. can be journeyed upon only when we realize we all share the same blood. And Luffy even in that moment invites Jinbe to join the crew. And I think we have a new crew member here as well in this saga. I had thought we were done adding crew members, but no, I think Jinbe is going to be part of the crew, which I just love the idea that we have a Fishman here among the crew. And Jinbe is rapidly becoming a favorite character for me as well. But yeah, that moment of him giving his blood to Luffy, and that for me is the heart of this particular saga. Loved it. But you also have other characters doing something similar on both sides. On the Fishman side and the human side, you have Hachi, for example, who overcomes the prejudice that he grew up with. And you have a throwback to Tom and his brother, his little brother Den, who helps Frankie with the ship, with the Sunny, the Thousand Sunny. And also you have Whitebeard, who, in an act of compassion, prevented humans from preying upon Fishman Island. And then another beautiful moment here, you have Nami's forgiveness of Hachi and Jinbe, valuing, of course, her life in the process and saying, this is who I am. Yes, I suffered because of what these others did to me, but who I am now, the people I'm with now, they're also a product of what's happened to me. And she embraces her whole self. And what an entirely beautiful moment that is, that forgiveness, that cleansing. It's the act of forgiving that allows Nami to let go of the hatred and the fear and to become a whole person again. And I just find that so compelling and beautiful. You also have this freedom from hate that results. And freedom, as we know, is really important in One Piece. Freedom from hate would be necessary, I think, in order for you not only to be whole, but to pursue your dreams with 100% of yourself. And going back to Jinbe, he also understands the importance of Luffy not just crashing in and fighting Hody on his own without being asked. He understands that the permission and the support of the people of Fishman Island is vital in order for the healing to happen. Because if Luffy just comes in to save the day from outside without that permission, without that agreement, then of course he just is another human picking on another fishman. And I think it's brilliant the way that he goes about getting that permission. And then we see, of course, Luffy Unleashed, which is, everybody's going to cheer for that, obviously. But Jinbe fundamentally understands the importance of connections between those who have in the past seen each other as foes. To overcome hatred, they must be united with respect for each other, respect for each other's will. The alternative to that respect is hatred that denies the humanity of the other and denies the will of the other. As Prince Fukaboshi explains about Hody, such hatred that denies the humanity of the other is void. It is empty. It denies experience. It denies compassion. But recognizing humanity in the other means not allowing places like Fishman District to even exist. If we are being compassionate, we do not allow such places to exist, such places where we sweep the dregs away and deny that they are even human, that we see them as garbage, as we've seen in a previous arc in One Piece. That this is what makes hatred fester. This is what brings about the legacy of hate. And sometimes it's not just in the extreme acts, in the obvious acts of violence. Sometimes it's in the daily denial of the existence of others that we create hatred. And this sort of daily neglect and denial of humanity is what makes up history. And another thing I think that Fukaboshi brings up is the idea of denying the past, of destroying the past, which brings up the question, how do we transcend it? How do we overcome decades and even centuries of hatred and neglect and othering and fear? How do we transcend this? How do we move on from it? And I think that Oda does give an answer in this particular saga. It is an answer that he puts in the mouth of Luffy. And the answer is friendship. What does friendship entail but the acknowledgement of the other, the acknowledgement of their dreams, of their hopes and aspirations, the acknowledgement of their humanity, and seeing oneself in them and having compassion. We also, of course, in addition to these themes, have some epic fights in here. You have the Straw Hats rising to the occasion with their new abilities. Some really cool stuff, obviously. It does, in fact, culminate after the victory in a one-piece party, which is entirely appropriate and beautiful. What better symbol could we have of unity in the end? This is why I think Oda loves drawing parties, because he is affirming love, he is affirming connection, he is affirming compassion, and that is just a beautiful thing. But in the end, we do see Madame Charlie's prophecy, in a sense, coming true. Luffy has, in a sense, destroyed the old Fishman Island. He is a catalyst for change, that is for sure. He and the Straw Hats have brought about important change here. In the process, of course, showing off their cool powers and fighting against the odds of 10 against 100,000 and all that. But they also help to, importantly, restore the will of the people of Fishman Island. They are an example of courage. They are an inspiration to strive. They are, in fact, a symbol of the restoration of will. And this is what gives us meaning when we participate vicariously in that triumph, in that victory. We experience the restoration of our own will and the sense of meaning that follows. And that's a wonderful thing. That is the power of story. That is the power of One Piece. And that is why we must respect the dreams of individuals. Even the Kraken has its will restored by Luffy. And it's just a wonderful thing. And of course, there are bigger adventures to come here at the end. We have seen how Luffy has angered in the most Luffy-like way. Big Mom, one of the 4 emperors. We're going to go on to the New World with enemies already lined up here. Blackbeard is out there as well, looming. And of course, we learn about the feud between Akainu and Aokiji. And I actually think I said those correctly this time. So I do learn. But yeah, big things are happening out there in the world, and the Straw Hats are ready to venture out and face him. So that is it for me for now. Until next time.